So while the keyboard is appearing correctly and going away when we touch elsewhere on the screen, I'd like it to go away when we touch the return key. And we can do this using a feature of Objective-C called delegation. Now, it's the first time we've seen delegation, so it might look a little strange this first time around, but let me show you the overall process and then we'll talk about what happens. So I'm jumping across to the storyboard and I'm going to make sure that I have my UI text field selected and it's showing up in blue here. With that selected, I'm opening up the Utilities panel on the right-hand side, and the area that I'm interested in is the inspectors, the top section, specifically the last one, the Connections Inspector on the right. Again, this is context sensitive, so you want to make sure that you have the right controls selected in the storyboard. This will have a bunch of different options here. The one that I'm interested in is this one called Delegate. I can get to this from this Connections Inspector. I could also get to it by right-clicking or control-clicking on the control itself. We can see that we have the same collection, even though it looks a little different. But I'm going to use the Connections Inspector. And as I hover over the circle on the right-hand side, you'll see the plus button appear. I'm going to click that, hold down the mouse key, and drag down to this bottom bar below the view controller till it actually highlights the first icon here, which is the view controller, and let go. Now, it didn't pop anything up, but what I'm now saying is my view controller class, meaning my viewcontroller.h and .m file, is now defined as being the delegate for this UI text field. Well, what does that mean? Well, let me show you. If I select that text field, I'm going to jump to the Quick Help section of the inspector, just because that's a quick way to get to the UI text field class reference, the documentation just for this text field. Well, there's an entry in here telling me that a text field object supports the use of a delegate object to handle editing relating notifications. Okay, fair enough. What does that mean? Well, without getting too deep in it, what this actually means is that being a delegate for a UI text field means there's a bunch of different notifications that the text field can provide, saying when that text field is beginning editing or ended editing, or somebody has hit the clear button or somebody has hit the return button, and it's happy to send these notifications to any class that volunteers as a delegate. So by me clicking and dragging that delegate connection to my view controller, we have a bunch of different methods that I can choose to respond to opt into these notifications. And one of them is called text field should return. So I'm going to click on that. It gives me the signature of it. I've got a bit of information. It asks the delegate object if the text field should process the pressing of the return button. That's exactly what I want. So I'm going to grab this line here, which is that method signature. It's an instance method returning a bool. I'll copy that, jump back into my code. And in my view controller class, and it is my view controller that's volunteering as a delegate, after change label, it doesn't really matter where it is, as long as it's inside the implementation, I will paste in that line of code. It is a method, so I'm going to have the opening and closing curly braces for it. And here I can add a little bit of code to say I would like to make that text field resign first responder or call end editing on the entire view. I could just copy and paste this line here, the self.simple text field resign first responder call. Although interestingly, I am being passed in a parameter that is a reference to whatever the text field is that caused this to happen. So I could use that too. I could just say text field space resign first responder. It will work exactly the same way. Now this method does return a bool to say whether this text field should return. I'm going to say yes. So just return yes, or it'll complain about me getting to the end of a non-void function. Now go ahead and run it. So when we type something in here, we can certainly use this application. It works, it responds, the keyboard goes away. I click back in, we become first responder. But if I touch somewhere else on the screen, it goes away. And finally, if I click back in and hit the return key, we're going to respond to that text field should return and make that go away as well. Now finally, if I actually don't like the return key here, I could change this to something else, like go or done. And I do that by going back into the storyboard. I'm going to select that text field. It is already selected. I'll jump across to the Utilities section, and I want to go to the fourth one here, which is the Attributes Inspector. And there's a drop-down box for return key. So which return key is it? Default or go, Google, route, search, send. I'm going to just change it to done. And this is all we need to do. It will respond exactly the same way. It will still act as the return key, so it'll respond to the same events. But if we type in there, we hit the button, that works, but we also get the done button, which is going to work just the same way. So these are the 3 different ways of making the keyboard go away. We can do it directly from the button touch. We could touch somewhere else in the interface, or by responding to the return key being pressed by using a little bit of delegation. Now, it might seem that delegation is kind of overkill to something that seems a little bit simple, like just making a keyboard go away. And indeed, that is the case, but delegation is a very powerful technique in iOS development. So in the next movie, we're going to talk a bit more about exactly what's going on with this delegation option.